This is the CreaseCast.
Growing up, there was this kid that I knew who, like, just annoyed the shit out of me. I don't know. He was like a normal kid, like just a regular kid, but like for whatever reason, like as a kid, I just always found him really annoying. And then I heard myself speak on, like, I don't know, we had like a tape recorder or something, and I was recording myself for, like, I don't know, like to record myself playing guitar or something, and I heard myself speak. And this is when I was like, 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever it is. It would have been like the first time, because, like, I didn't grow up with like a camcorder or anything in my family. So it's like the first time I heard myself in a recording, and I was devastated because I was like, oh my God, I sound like this kid that I fucking hate. I find him so annoying. I sound just like him. So it was like a real crippling blow to
worst
my
nightmare.
ego. Like it was a horrible nightmare. Speaking of horrible nightmares, I want to get right
How
into,
about those Canucks?
How about them Vancouver Canucks?
Oh,
man, shutout loss. Right? No. Yeah, it was a shutout.
Shutout loss 4-0 over against
in my
the Jets.
In my head, I said shootout loss, and I was like, wait.
That's also correct. That's also correct, because they did lose to Montreal on Saturday. Yeah, both games we have not covered since. I mean, the Canucks had such a good last week was such a good start. They had such a great week. Things were going well, even with the split in Montreal. Like everything was doing all right. And then Francesco Aquilini said something about injuries with an exclamation point.
Injuries!
And it just all immedially just went away.
All of the bad things went at once. And
they're like, "Oh, you really wanna test fate like this? Is this you're just asking for it?" That and the can't tell why we're so bad.
Like the first time he tweeted, like, his the team was so dismal to start the year, like, look at this wonderful goaltending we're getting. Like that in itself was like just really funny, because it's like it's such a huge jinx where like every game afterwards you would get like subpar goaltending and the team would crater. But that hasn't been the case. Demko has still been like very good. But when he tweeted out the whole like Travis Boyd, what a pickup,
oh my,
like queuing up for playoffs, injuries with an exclamation mark, and you're in your head as like any Canucks fan with like a semblance of a brain who's been watching this team for the last like 10 years, 5 years even, would know, like, this is a bad omen. Why would you just put it in writing that injuries are the cause of your problems? And then sure enough, Pettersson goes on LTIR, and then Bo Horvat takes a slap shot to the ankle. And Sutter and Beagle also missed last game too. So it's like they're down to Tyler Grayovac.
Centers. Absolutely no centers from the opening night roster. They're all gone.
Literally everyone is gone, and it comes at a point in the season where there are 20 games left, and according to like Drance and like all the other number guys, like they need to win 15 or more to even have a shot at 62 points and cracking the playoffs. Yeah. And now they're going to have to do it possibly without every single center they started the year with the exception of Adam Gaudette, who technically did play center in the first game of the year.
Okay.
But
that's
when we're getting into like the
we're
minutia,
good then, guys.
right?
Playoffs.
Yeah,
Let's go. You know what?
Adam Gaudette, first line center, no problem, right?
Here we go. This is it. This is the stretch we've been waiting for. Hockey god time. Let's go.
Yeah. So before we get into the negativity, because I don't know, like, I think we're going to have different reads on that game, and we'll get into this later, but why don't we quickly get into our Infinity Gauntlet picks, because let's start off hot with some positives. So
I think you should go first today, because I think I generally go first, and I think we should flip the table. I want to hear what you got going today. Oh, he was not prepared.
Okay. My choice is to pass. No, I'm kidding.
No. Okay.
So from a shootout loss, I would still have to give it to Braden Holtby. He let in a couple were a little iffy, but generally the entire night he was on. And the few goals that did get by him, like we were talking about this all throughout the game, he had no chance on. He had Edler standing right in front of him, screening him before even the Habs players were in his way screening him. Like, he had no clue where shots were coming from. For whatever reason, the Canucks forwards and skaters in front of him just thought like, hey, you know what our 32-year-old goaltender on the decline of his career needs? No vision. You know what I mean? Like, It made no sense. And then from yesterday's game, the shutout loss, I would probably give it to Demko as well. 4 goals is a rough look, but again, we were talking about that game too, like just no chance on a couple of them. Bounces weren't going their way, and he was the only reason they really were in that game until the third period when the wheels completely fell off. So hard to give it to any kind of skater because I don't think really anybody stood out in like a way where I'd be like, yeah, the only reason the Canucks are in it are because of X player, especially in the Jets game. Maybe in the Habs game, you could, make an exception for, Besser or whatever. But I just don't think it was that good of a defensive effort where I could be like, yeah, the skaters are the reason why they won that game. Like, I really think like it was pretty much Holtby just like getting shellacked again, facing like ugly shot attempts from Montreal and eking out a single point.
Yeah, I would agree with absolutely both of those. If I had to give it to somebody different, just for the sake of interest, I guess if I were to combine it for the 2 games, because again, I would go with both of those for sure. I guess, right. But if I have to pick somebody else, I'm trying to think who really stuck out this week. I mean, Besser looked. Yeah, I think Besser would probably be my pick. He just had that weekend for him. He looked like a player that could lead a team on his own, even if that's not what he's being asked to do.
I had the tweet on that one, the game day, and I was like LMAO. Brock Besser is having such a good season that the Canucks are going to be so fucked when they try to re-sign this guy at the end of his current deal, because the way he's playing to carry this team in the absences of Elias Pettersson is like, when Elias Pettersson is in the lineup, it was still kind of the Brock Besser resurgence tour that if he carries this over into next season and the season following, when he needs that re-up on his qualifying offer of like 7.8 million, he might be commanding a bit more. And this team might be just like in Toronto territory when it comes to how much money is going to be tied up in their top 6, which is a Mercedes
worse problems.
You want to have to pay.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you also have that caveat in the back of your mind of like, well, if Jim Benning's the guy still in 3 years and he gets a full 10-year rebuild, do we trust him to manage the cap leading up to that Brock Besser extension? This is why I want to do the gauntlet before I started talking, because I knew I would pitch a bunch of points that would bring everybody down.
Jeez, talk about as if I haven't had a rough enough day today, Cody. I didn't need this.
Yeah,
I didn't need to think about this.
These are the things that go through my head.
I mean, I can't blame you.
When you're driving from North Delta to Port Moody for 45 minutes every day, you get some time with your own thoughts. And unfortunately, my thoughts drifted to, oh no,
we're so screwed.
Benning's the guy to extend Besser. We are so screwed.
But oh man,
that's why I wanted to start with the Infinity Gauntlet, because I wanted to be positive, because there were some good things to take away from the weekend and Monday's game. Some of the negatives, team really didn't look good against the Jets. I listened to the Travis Green presser. I don't know if you did, for the Monday game. He was very glowing in his praise of it. Yeah, he was very positive. He was very much like, I love to compete in the battle of our team. Thought they deserved better. It didn't look as as much of a blowout as 4-0 looks. It wasn't that bad in his perspective. I've heard several other opinions that kind of echo that sentiment, like on just like 650 radio, other podcasts, and I don't know, maybe you can agree or disagree, but I thought the team looked like shit against the Jets. Like
I
I know like the counting stats were in their favor where they were, they were out chancing them, they were, out attempting them at 5v5, but all the shots were from the point or the outside. Like nothing was dangerous. It was just volume, but it wasn't like volume that you would ever be like, "Oh yeah, this is going to beat Hellebuck." Like he's a Vezina caliber Hart MVP candidate for a reason, because you can't just like float point shots on him for 60 minutes and hope they're going to get by. But that's all they had. So I don't know. I feel like I'm the taking crazy pills gif, you know what I mean? Where
I
I'm
don't
like, did I watch the same game?
I don't think you're taking crazy pills, but I will say this. I think they were better in this game than in some of the games last week that they actually won. Like
Fair.
they were better in this game than arguably both the Ottawa games. Like just in the sense of
And that
like they were
second Montreal game too.
and that second Montreal game. Yeah, they were better in this game than they were in the last four. And this has been kind of the trend this year, right? Is the Canucks have won a lot of games that they arguably shouldn't have, and lost a lot of games where the effort level was actually kind of there.
Yeah.
I think they did an okay job at getting shots a little bit within closer range, but it still wasn't enough. And you and I talked about this. One of my biggest issues regarding the Travis Green era, and I guess this would kind of go back to the Willie Desjardins era a little bit as well. And as much as I think Travis Green is a very, very good coach, the one thing that I've really always had issues with is that they rely far too much on shots from the blue line. They rely way too much on long range shots, trying to get a deflection, instead of what they're really more well equipped to do, which is get the puck into the trenches, in close in front of the net, and look and make passing plays close around the net and just make the goalie work for it moving across the crease. This is something that they're much better built for with the creative players they have. And I think they're curbing their own creativity a little bit by relying so much on like Tyler Myers taking a long shot, or Alex Edler taking a long shot, or even Quinn Hughes taking a lot of long shots, just because like I get they're good, like they're all relatively decent shooters, but the scores they have could do so much more if you give them a little bit more ability to work in close and in front of the net, the way the Sedins did when they were playing at their best. Maybe they were not like that, that linked linked in their minds and everything as the Sedins were, but they still have that level of play. And I think as far as the Jets game was concerned, it was a lot of the bad luck that they weren't getting caught on in the last week or so kind of came back to roost here. I mean, I think just like immediately my mind goes right to that second goal, the Paul Stastny goal in the third, where he takes the shot. It goes off of, I think, Travis Hamonick's knee, and bounces up over him, flips over Demko and into the net, like just a complete fluke of a goal. And like, there's nothing any of them necessarily did wrong on that play. It's just completely just bad, like the worst luck possible. Yeah. And then I think, and right before that had been, I think it was the Horvat getting hit with the blocked shot. I think it happened on the shift right before it. Yeah. So it's just a whole mess of things that all just came back to haunt them in one game. And I mean, you said it right at the top, there's 20 games left, and I gotta say, it's flown by. I'm shocked it's already we're already this close to being done here. It doesn't feel like it.
They said it on the Vancast when they were like, it was just like this past month that the Derek Forbort interaction with Hoglander happened. Like it was like not even 30 days ago that this happened, and everyone was in an outrage. That's like how like fast the season has kind of blown by, where that seems like it was months and months and months ago, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And here they are about to enter their week-long kind of hiatus after this next game against the Jets again. And everyone's going to catch up. it's going to be about as even as can be. Granted, we have some news about that later to get into, but it's not looking like too hot for them when they really needed to kind of earn 2 points against Montreal. Couldn't hand over loser points. They needed to get 2 points against Winnipeg, who are one of those teams where like they're pretty high up there, but likely you're going to be competing with them for that third spot, maybe if you were planning on going on a run. And to get shut out is pretty rough. And it's a kind of a tragic closer to a month where it seemed like they were kind of getting the bounces their way and maybe could just like kind of luck their way into enough points to skate by. But now we're looking at April, where all the teams are going to be resuming play. They're still going to not have games in hand on a few of them, and they're going to be desperate for 2 points. JT Miller had said it in his post game. Like, he looked pissed because he was just like we can't keep putting ourselves in this situation, and the next couple weeks are going to be like super tight. And then like before they could even announce that the presser was over, he's just like got up and like stormed off. Like, the dude wants to win badly, and even he knows, like, with Horvat out, all of the responsibility to try and carry play at 5v5 is going to fall on him, and probably, I guess, Adam Gaudette, which gets to our like next segment, which is, what do they do with the center depth? What do they do if Horvat's like got an actual injured like leg, if it's broken, or if it's like a sprain and he's out for like a considerable amount of time, like pushing LTIR? They don't have the pieces like at all.
Oh, absolutely not. They have not. They have like, I mean, even like in the taxi squad, the only guy they have as a center right now available is Mark Michaelis. Right.
Great.
They got left. Now, the one factor that is new, and again, we joked about the injuries tweet at the top, but Travis Boyd couldn't get here at a better time. He won't play the game on Wednesday. He's still quarantining. They claimed him from Toronto. He's got a Stanley Cup with the Capitals. Although he only played, I believe, one playoff game that year, he still has the ring and everything. Yep. He spent most of his time with the Hershey Bears. He had 8 points this season in 20 games with Toronto.
Which is a good clip, all things considered.
Yeah, it's not too bad, especially because he's probably playing fourth line minutes. He's not really. He's clearly not one of their big guys, because they're a very deep roster, especially at forward. And he's not going to, he's not a game changer. He's not going to come in and make things a whole lot better, but he couldn't show up here at a better time. You need him to maybe the joke was already that, he might have to play top six, like Jimmy Vesey, who's already playing,
who's already a top six player, basically.
Who's already a top six player. Absolutely default. Shouldn't be. Very good player. He's a good guy. He's a good player. We can talk about him.
Completely fine.
Yeah. Like, I've liked him so far. And he, I think it was Jay Fresh Hockey on Twitter who was talking about how him, Vesey, and Boyd, as far as the Canucks' current forwards go, are actually some of the better like offensive drivers. Just in
was that the goals above replacement one or whatever?
I think it was. Yes. I think it was like they were second and third behind but some of like the lower ranked guys, which is great. Which is again an improvement. And when you consider, especially that Boyd only comes in at a 700,000 cap hit, like, this is the stuff that they should have been looking at years ago. These are the kinds of offensive guys you should have been picking up for your bottom six a lot sooner. But nope.
Instead of signing
expensive guys,
deals.
He's doing all right. Like, I think he'll end up getting slotted in probably second line with VC and Virtanen. Which out of the gate.
Oh my god, that is a rough second line, man. Like, this deep into the season, when you're in like you're unabashedly in your hunt for the playoffs, like all the moves by the management, everything that's coming out in the news about how they're holding off on being sellers, like, they're clearly desperate to try and make playoffs, and your top 6 for the next game might be Hoglander, Miller, Besser, and then your second
3.
line. Yeah, there's your best line imaginable.
Yes.
And then your second line is VC, Gaudette, and Virtanen. And
now, if you told me VC, Gaudette, and Virtanen were my 4th line, I'm like, oh, we got a good. That's not bad.
Fun.
That's a damn good team. That's an all right team. That's an okay team. Second line, oh no, that's an immediate Buffalo Sabres vibe a little bit, and I don't love that. I don't love that at all.
To push back for like the Buffalo fans that we have on our pod, Buffalo has like immense talent in their top 6 who are playing like 4th liners. Like the Canucks right now, as they're currently constructed, have a shit ton of 4th liners, but they're now being thrust into middle 6 territory where your 3rd line is now, I guess, Jace Howrluck's in the center again, or Tyler Mott's in the center, or Mark Michaelis. Like one of those 3 is probably your 3C. And all those guys are completely interchangeable in your bottom 6. And Grayovac is your default 4th line center after having played no games in the NHL this season. Like for a team that's supposed to be pushing for playoffs, you couldn't have asked for a crappier forward group to like. This isn't even getting into like the defense and just like how bad like Edler looked in the last game.
Yeah.
But that's just your forward group where, I mean, the joke has been for so long since like 2016-17. At the end of the year, they would always say, we thought we had depth. And then the start of the next season, they said, we've got a good group. It's very deep right now. We're really happy with our forward depth. And here we are trending in that exact same direction where at the end of the season, the blame is going to go on injuries. And we weren't as deep as we thought we were.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's getting like kind of ugly for like Canucks fans who have seen this song and dance like so many years prior.
Yeah. I think in a very early episode of Roxy Fever this year, Jackson McDonald said like this year, like last year, the Canucks talked about how lucky the Canucks were last year when it came to injuries and how they were relatively healthy most of the year. And they didn't lose a lot of man games aside from like until like the very end of the paused season with Besser and Markstrom. They didn't really lose a lot down the stretch. Guys were mostly healthy. Like hell, Chris Tanev played an entire year, which never happened.
He got injured in the last game of the season. That's how healthy he was, and like,
which is stunning. That's like saying Sammy Salo made it through 10 games. Like you'd be like, what? Like it's impossible. That can't happen.
Yeah. Their decor was basically healthy the entire year. The only rotations that happened were based on how performance was going, which would mean Oscar Fantenberg or Jordy Ben were rotating in and out. But otherwise, completely healthy.
Yeah, and hell, this year the defense has been pretty darn healthy for the most part. Yeah. I don't think they've lost anybody for a considerable amount of time, except for Jalen Chatfield. I think got hurt very briefly for like 2 games.
Yeah, they said he might have had a concussion, and then of course Jordy Ben's COVID protocol at the start of the season. But like you said, like that's nothing. Yeah. If it's one game out of 56 games, like it's really nothing. There hasn't been like for example when Myers blocked that shot the other night, I thought, oh man, this is going to be the first significant injury to the D-core this season, because he went down like a freaking sack of hammers, man.
That was a Weber shot too, wasn't it?
Right off the kneecap. I was like, oh boy, like because we criticize Myers all the time, but you can't deny that the guy chews minutes at 5v5 like no one else. Like,
and he's willing to put his body into bad situations to try and stop a scoring chance, which he very much did there. Like, I'm not putting myself in front of a Shea Weber shot.
No kidding.
I'm the goalie. I'm just skating out of the way. Like, I'm like, okay, see ya, I'm out of here. Yeah, have fun.
But like it's always really funny when you see the timer during a game when it's like Tyler Myers current shift and it's like him getting pinned into the zone for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. But he'll take 2 shifts off and he'll come back and he'll do another 3 to 4 minute long shift because that's what you can count on him to do, is to be a body who's going to block a Shea Weber slap shot from the point after 2.5 minutes standing on the ice. Like, he'll give that to you. So if you lose those minutes, it's always about who do you replace those minutes with. Jordy Ben, for as reliable as he's looked this season, even up with a pair with Quinn Hughes, he still hasn't really cracked 14 minutes a game. Like, the coaches don't trust him really, even though it seems like objectively they should, because he can PK and he can shoot minutes 5v5, but they don't really use him. So if you lose Myers, are you trusting Jalen Chatfield to suddenly come in and play 18 minutes a night, and Hamonic 23 and Schmidt goes up to 28 minutes? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you might end up at where Ottawa has with Thomas Chabot, where they're literally playing him like 30 minutes a game. At this point, they're like close to 30 minutes a game, which is insanity. Yeah. You might end up reaching that point specifically with like a Hughes, or more likely if Myers got hurt, like a Nate Schmidt. And you can't win, and you obviously can't win games like that. And not because Schmidt isn't capable, just because that leaves you very exposed in that bottom pair. When you have to bring up somebody else and then try and find somebody to take the minutes that Schmidt is now not available for. And it's just that whole domino effect.
Right, exactly. But we don't know, like, right now, if Horvat is like going to be injured like for like a long time. So maybe like all this pontification about the lineup and like the worry about who's going to eat minutes at center might be for nothing. Like, he might come back on Wednesday. Hell, the game might be delayed as far as we know, given the current delays happening across the North Division right now.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we're so fortunate that they're even able to say he's day to day. Like, that injury looked like there was a lot of reason to look at that and be like, oh my God, that might be season over. Like, that might be not just for him, but for the team itself. Like, there was
pretty much if they lose him,
season's over. You're done. You're not going anywhere. Even if Pettersson comes back.
Your team is instantly a seller if Bo Horvat is done for the year and all you have is Miller and Gaudette in your lineup as centers. If the GM, even after losing Horvat, was like, yeah, we're still going to try and push for playoffs and we're not going to make any decisions yet, I would be outside Rogers Arena with a sign saying fire betting. Like, no question about it, because even with their current lineup with Horvat playing out of his mind, you can't honestly be like, oh yeah, they're going to get 35 points out of their next 22 games. Like, that's just never going to happen. Yeah.
Winnipeg was a very clear litmus test of what can you do? Can you beat the teams in front of you? Because we'll get into why I think this later. As far as before yesterday's game was concerned, I very much saw this as it's now a 5-team race, in my opinion. It's Toronto and Edmonton are probably the two most likely to make the playoffs right now. Yeah. And then you've got Montreal, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. Those are your final 3. Those are the only other 3 that can make it. Calgary is not in there anymore, and we can talk about that later. But as far as I am concerned, this was what they needed to prove, that they could beat a team like Winnipeg, and not without using overtime or without using any sort of like necessarily a monster game from Thatcher Demko. And they've still got one more game to kind of split the difference here. But as far as that game went, I mean, 4-0 and just a couple points, especially with the injuries and how lifeless they kind of looked, especially in certain aspects. I'm not feeling so good about where this season's going. I don't think there's a lot. And I mean, Thomas Drance tweeted about it yesterday when the Canucks claimed Travis Boyd, that make no mistake, these are transactions you expect from a club positioning itself to sell. And that's true. Like, those are guys that they're bringing in to fill depth roles so they can have at least NHL capable players until until they reach the end of the year, because they need to start moving out some guys. They need to start shuffling out the more expensive guys.
Right.
And Boyd and VC, as far as they go, are capable NHLers. And so are the most of their defense that they have right now, which is why I think it's time we have to repitch the Tyler Myers for fourth line call right now.
Like, if there was ever a time, we said this when we were last pitching this, that if there was ever a time, but now,
do it.
Really, if there ever was a time to put a freaking D-man on your forward lines, throw Tyler Myers on your second line with Gaudette and VC. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool.
Do
it. It'd be fucking awesome. Like, whenever, like, because obviously I'm a Jets fan. I've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast and on Twitter as well, I believe. But
terrible.
Whenever Dustin Bufaglian got penciled into the lineup as a forward, he would publicly be like, I fucking hate doing this, but I gotta do it for the team. Like, he would just like not even like,
I hated it too.
He wouldn't even hide it.
Too.
Everyone did, but he was good at it because he was fucking huge and he could skate like the wind for a 255-pound man.
Yeah.
And so all I want is just a big giant giraffe cruising down the right wing and being a better power forward than Jake Virtanen. That is the dream.
And unlike Byfuglien, he definitely would love playing forward. He would He would come off the ice. Like, this is what's going to happen. He's going to play on the fourth line. He is going to come off the ice for his post-game press conference after he's gotten 2 goals and an assist. And he's going to be like, that was awesome. And he's like, that was so much fun. Like, I love just getting up in the rush and crashing the net. Oh, he would be over the moon. I can tell you like that. I can tell you with all certainty that Tyler Myers would absolutely love playing fourth line forward ice time.
Yeah,
He would absolutely adore it. And frankly, as far as their, like, we talked about what happens with, time with ice time and everything.
Yeah.
Imagine you're able to take a guy like Tyler Myers, who you already have, again, playing close to 20 minutes a night. You throw him on your forward line as essentially, like we joked that he's like the rover, essentially. Now you have a line essentially at points where you have 3 NHL defensemen, but at the very least, you have 3 capable NHL players guaranteed on your ice.
Like, the spread is you at least have like an X number of guys who can prove to play NHL minutes instead of, a line of Michaelis, Howard and, Jimmy VC or whatever, like plodding around like with no chemistry.
Yeah, and in a way, it's almost a good way to insulate, say, a defenseman who, like a Jalen Chatfield or an Olli Levy would be a better option.
That would be a better
idea
option
here. Where if theoretically you're putting Levy out there, say with, I don't know, we'll say for all intents and purposes, Travis Hamonic. We'll say he's out there with Hamonic. I think they play the same side, but whatever. Imagine you throw them out there, and then you also have Myers playing on like your fourth line or something instead. Now you have essentially 2 NHL defensemen already on the ice with Levy to essentially give him the more time and space and a little bit more defensive help. It could work. Like, again, why the hell not? This is, we're going nowhere fast right now. Yeah. Everyone is hurt. You might as well just start throwing things at a wall. Louis Eriksson on the defense, put him on the blue line. Again, like, at this point, we joke, but at the same time, like, you do right now, all you really need are NHL bodies, which the Canucks are obviously short on. And if you can find any way possible to potentially get more of your NHL capable players into the lineup at once, and even if that means putting them in unconventional spots, it might be worth your while just to make your team a little bit more competitive and possibly win a couple more games down the stretch that you maybe wouldn't. It's worth trying.
Yeah, because like right now too, like I think James Sobalski or whatever, I think this morning tweeted like how he heard rumblings that Jake Virtanen was on the trade market for like a depth defenseman for Florida.
Oh, yeah, Markus Nutivaara.
Yeah, and this kind of just like segues into like the idea that the team right now, and even leading up to Bo Horvat's injury, they were constantly just rejigging lines to see what would stick. And for a team that is 36 games into the season, if you're still trying to get something going in your forward groups and you haven't like generated any semblance of consistency or chemistry, then that tells me it doesn't really matter who you bring in. If it's depth like Markus Nutivaara, like all you're doing right now is just looking towards next year.
Yeah.
Because whatever you've got right now isn't cutting it for your top six. You're struggling to just like, let alone like out attempt Ottawa, but earn like the full 2 points and keep points away from them. Like this deep into a season, the team by now should know what they are, and it still seems like they are listless and just kind of operating on instinct and not so much as to like any semblance of chemistry. And I mean, if they're looking at getting rid of Virtanen for like another guy who's basically just going to be playing behind or in front of Levy or Chatfield, then it kind of just seems like, okay, I guess they're just throwing the season in the crapper. They're just about to be like, okay, well, let's just try and rejig our cap structure so that we can not get embarrassed again next year and have actual credible NHL pieces in our depth instead of who is it? Mark Michaelis.
Mark Michaelis, yeah.
Michaelis and Tyler Grayovac. That's it.
Yeah. So interestingly, so I did want to actually talk about a little bit about Markus Nutivaara because I don't know a whole lot about him. I just seen him in like snippets when he was playing for the Blue Jackets up until last season. But I knew enough about him that back when this is going to get the broadcast will never invite me on their show ever for this. But back when the Canucks were looking to move Thomas Vanek to the Blue Jackets, that was actually Nutivaara was actually the guy I wanted them to get in that return, to get him and possibly a pick to come with it rather than Tyler Mott. That's who I was hoping for because at the time he was, I think, on their third. He was like their third pairing, relatively cheap contract. And young enough that I was like, this is a guy worth taking a flyer on because your defense is already relatively older. It might be worth your time to try and bring in somebody a little bit younger who's already playing decent NHL minutes. For a guy who's also, I believe, a 7th round pick. Like that's already we make too much of a deal about what round a guy's picked in. But last round of the draft and you make it into the NHL, that's a huge W for a lot of people. For a lot of teams, that's a massive win. So, he has struggled to stay in the lineup. I don't know if that's due to injuries or just not being the best option. This year he's only played 9 games for Florida, but he had 3 assists in those 9 games, which isn't too bad. And the defense for the Canucks is a little bit, they have the guys, they have the NHL capable bodies, but not a lot of them. They're very short on depth at that position. And again, they're very lucky they've stayed so healthy this year because one Jenga block is all it would take to just completely topple the tower here. Right. So, and I mean, you're already seeing some of the guys on defense that they have now, like Alex Edler. If you want to talk about last night's game, I mean, we haven't talked much about Alex Edler on this show. He has really taken a dip. And last night was a really good example of that, where he tries to make the pinch in the first period, completely misses, and Blake Wheeler just blows by him like nobody's business. Like prime Edler, maybe
fellow senior Blake Wheeler.
Right.
Who is no spring chicken himself, but
absolutely. Prime Alex Edler maybe gets back and is able to kind of make up for that and cut him off. But you knew the second he got the step on him that he was just gonna gone. He was gone. And it really put the Canucks on the 2-on-1. Demko ends up getting caught cheating just a little bit and on his post, and Wheeler's able to put it in. And as far as Nutivaara is concerned, like he's very much a bottom pairing guy, more or less. I mean, on this Canucks team, maybe he could play on your second. He might be a decent. He might be an upgrade. Yeah, he might be an upgrade. According to Cap Friendly, by the way, shout out Cap Friendly because they had a thing over the weekend where they talked about how they've noticed their work getting used on a lot of other places and just not getting credited back to them. And I'm like, and it's like, you know what? I think we name dropped them a fair amount on the show, but
we do.
Just for clarification, shout out Cap Friendly. They're awesome.
In case we hadn't mentioned it, big shout out to Cap Friendly. It's pretty much open every time we start an episode.
Yes,
guaranteed.
And I don't think they get paid to do this. I think they're just doing this out of the good, more or less.
Their love of the game.
Yeah, I think absolutely. They're just doing this out of the goodness of their heart, and we all owe them a debt of gratitude. So he carries a $2.7 million cap hit according to Cap Friendly for this year and next. So he makes more than Virtanen in far as cap is concerned, I believe, because Virtanen's officially is 2.4.
Yeah, his cap is 2.25 or something, but like his second year carries most of the salary at like 3.4 million for the year or something. Right.
The actual dollars are what matter more to the owners of both teams, I would imagine. Right now, especially, Florida's never been a big money spender because they don't make a lot back. And of course, the Canucks are very much in the save all money we can in the Scrooge McDuck bin because there's a pandemic going on.
Yes. If you hadn't heard about it, here's the pandemic going on.
It does not help them when it comes to, say, re-signing Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko next year per se. Although I guess if you want to make the argument, it does open up the door when you let probably Jordy Benn's probably walking in free agency. Travis Hamonic, I would imagine, is in the same boat. Alex Edler's already going. Nutivaara would provide the Canucks with a third NHL defenseman, which, as far as the UFA market is looking, and Chatfield might also be on that list too, they're going to be down to just Schmidt, Myers, and whatever Hughes gets in his RFA deal, which is three. They're down to 3 defensemen next year, which is, not great because they don't really have a defensive prospect besides maybe Jack Rathbone, who's ready to immediately just step in. So they could really use that. Trade would make a lot of sense. I guess, do you think that this is something that they might go for?
I mean, maybe, but as we saw with the Canucks rumored deal for Virtanen and Dent and Heinen, no team wants Virtanen's second year. Maybe they can make it work with Florida, but it kind of sounds like they would have to spend a bit more to get rid of Virtanen's second year, and that's going to be kind of the sticking point for a lot of teams, even though it's very buyout friendly. Like if you buy it out, it's only like a $60,000 like cap hit or something on the second year. Like it's really not bad. Yeah. But they obviously do need defensive depth coming next year, because if they don't trust Juolevi to play in let's be honest, this is a lost season. It's a complete wash. They punted on the last years of Pettersson and Hughes entry-level contracts because they fucked up their cap so badly. So there's no real sense in playing to win but this is also an issue with the whole we don't have our coaches under contract, because there's no real reason to be playing to win because they don't have a fucking chance. But the coaches are playing to win because they're playing for their next contracts that this ownership group is too cheap to sign off on. So you have this disagreement in philosophy where you do need to play Ole Juolevi or Jalen Chatfield to see if they can be your cheap defenseman next year that plug the holes while they try and wipe out another year of cap and get actual credible NHL depth on their defense outside of Hughes and Schmidt and Myers. But they can't do that if the coach is basically playing an audition tape for the rest of the league as, hey, my current GM doesn't want to sign me to a contract. Look what I'm doing with 800-year-old Alex Edler as we wake him from his crypt to play ice hockey every game.
The dinosaur, all my friends are dead meme.
Yeah, exactly. So you have this these two opposing ideals basically occurring with the Canucks right now that could easily be solved if the GM just agreed, or sorry, not the GM, if ownership agreed in principle, like, hey, Travis, we want to sign you. Here's the rough contract, but we can't sign it until we know we are going to have fans in the building next year, but we want you at this price range. But right now, you have a coach who is not going to play Yule Levy. He's not going to play Rathbone. He's not going to get in Brogan Rafferty or Jalen Chatfield, any of those depth youth pieces that you would otherwise want to see at the home stretch of a lost season. That's not going to happen. The coach wants to win because he wants dollars on his next deal. And that just can't happen if ownership is still going to cheap out the entire time. So
yeah,
if Nutivaara is in the cards for a trade partner and you can get him for next year, you got to jump at the opportunity, but something tells me the ownership group is going to be the hindrance to that entire equation.
Yeah. Now, the one thing that is nice, at least for ownership's sake, in this, if Nutivaara for Virtanen went through, his actual dollars for next year is actually is 3.3, which is which I guess is 100,000 less than Virtanen's. So you would actually be getting money back, getting less money back in that return. The only likelihood, in all likelihood, though, I would imagine the Panthers would try and hold the Canucks a little bit to something where it's like, okay, we want to make it an even dollar exchange, so you're going to retain like whatever percentage it would be to say balance them right equally out in the middle, which again might be worth your time because you need the defense arguably more than you need the forwards, at least for next season. Like this year, they're looking very, very empty in the forward core because everybody is hurt. But when you go into next year, I mean, Podkolzin's probably coming by that point, so that helps. You look at, I believe maybe like, you might get Cole Lind.
You have Cole Lind showing up. Maybe he might even show up this season at this rate because apparently he's in Vancouver to look at a broken nose, but because he's
really, I didn't hear that. That's cool.
It's very cool that he's injured.
So cool. No,
I love when they're in pain.
Oh my god,
but
horrible.
He took a slap shot or something, he took a high stick to the nose or something in the Comets' last game, which was 2 weeks ago. And so the Canucks brought him up like a week after he got hit in the nose, which I'm wondering if that was all calculated and they were like, hey, let's bring him to Vancouver under the pretense of looking at his injury. But in reality, it's just to clear COVID protocols without affecting either their cap situation or like bypassing like COVID protocols. It's technically completely legal. Like they did this all the time last year with Oli Levy's hips. They kept bringing him up to look at their doctors or their specialists. So
that's
if this
honestly,
is all like 5D chess to get Cole Lind some NHL games, I mean, that's something. Maybe you see him.
Yeah. That actually would make a lot of sense. Wow. Yeah. That's yeah. You might have stumbled onto something here because I don't think that's been talked about yet. I don't think that's necessarily been brought up by anybody. Maybe
I believe Patrick Johnson had it in a tweet somewhere that his protocol would be ending in April at some point. But the question then is he legitimately have a broken nose and he can't play? Because if he has a broken nose, then it's like,
I would think it is, but I would imagine that what they're doing is that, say, they're kind of keeping him here, and if they're keeping it on the DL specifically because they're going to try and probably move somebody before the deadline, at which point Lind would step in at least to the taxi squad or something.
Right.
And they wouldn't have to worry about the quarantine thing anymore because they've theoretically just already solved it by getting him done ahead of time. That might actually play more into the fact of, hey, this team's about to sell a lot of people. They might be pulling the a little bit of a secret play here, which would be, I'll say this: Jim Benning the last week or so, with the VC thing with VC and Boyd, those are both solid pickups. He's actually done a decent job at finding cheap guys this week. The problem is is can they act now on, making it work by moving out the expensive guys? Because, if they don't, then it's just a huge loss. Then you've completely wasted time and everything. It's not worth it. You've also somehow talked about how, you've somehow gone from a season where it's like, oh, you can't spend any money to now magically having added another like $1 million.
Yeah, like that stuff I don't get. Like a part of me is like, oh, the Boyd pickup's really good. The VC pickup's really good. Like,
wait,
this is making your mistakes look really bad. But then I'm like, wait, if the GM if the ownership group had no problem picking up more money, why the fuck didn't they sign a third string goalie and get their goddamn best goalie prospects some fucking games?
I mean, he's not going to Utica now. At the very least, they're not playing any games because I don't know why. I mean,
but they could have got him games in the North Division of the AHL if they had just signed a goalie. Obviously, like our earlier estimations that they just didn't want to spend the money on a third string goalie. Well, you just pick up 2 bottom 6 forwards. Like,
sign me. I'm cheap. I'll play for me league men.
Does Aquilini just love bottom 6 forwards or something because like his front office staff is full of fucking former tough guys and grinders or something? Like,
oh no,
it doesn't make any sense to me that like a week after Jim Benning has his we live day-to-day speech and like how he admits he needs to get DiPietro games, how he doesn't float that to the ownership group and say, hey, we have contracts available. We've only signed 43 of 50. Like, we can sign like a shit ton more guys. We need to get our brightest goalie prospect some goddamn games this season. He hasn't played in a year. Please approve me signing a league minimum $670,000 or $700,000 deal. And
Chris Levesque might not be doing anything like since the last time he backed up for the Canucks. Seriously, like what's stopping you from just I don't know. There are lots of you could just easily sign. Like, there are plenty of cheap goalies you can bring in just to be number 3 if you don't want to waste any of your prospects. I mean, and again, the Canucks have contract space right now. I believe they're at 48. I don't know whether they're still really holding out hope that Vasily Podkolzin's playoffs are going to end in time for him to maybe show up for a couple games at the end of the year. I don't know if they're planning to sign Nikita Trampkin. That's also been floated.
Yeah.
Please no. But there's space to do it. I don't know why they wouldn't. But I will say it's interesting that your mind went to the goaltender on that whole idea, because mine actually went to, wait, if you're gonna bring in 1.5 million in contracts for like waiver pickups, why didn't you just give the 7 million to the Ducks to get Danton Heinen for Virtanen? Why didn't you just do that? Like that would have made.
I didn't even think of that either.
That would have been that you could have totally used that exact same amount of money to get Virtanen to Anaheim and bring in Danton Heinen, which arguably is probably a better pickup than Travis Boyd or Jimmy Vesey.
Yeah, what the hell?
I don't know why you didn't do that. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
God,
especially considering that money is, I think, technically not in play until next year.
Yeah,
I guess, and like it's not even a sense of like, oh, maybe they're just not making that much this year. Well, their base salary, I think, is still their base, like, because it's 1-year contracts. It's the same number. There's no real money differences or anything. It's So I don't know why they didn't do that, but there's probably something we're missing that I'm sure somebody a little bit better a better journalist could tell us. But
the only thing I could think of is if the pitch was, hey, we're going to take on these 2 waiver wire pickups. They're only $700K, $600K, or whatever, with the intention of getting rid of Jordy Ben or Tanner Pearson or whoever that totals the amount of the contracts you just picked up. That's the only pitch I could think of that they would try and make it make sense. Because otherwise, you're totally right. Like, if you were splitting hairs over like a couple $100,000 to get like a better bottom 6 forward in Danton Heinen, why are you suddenly like putting out a tweet that says, Travis Boyd, we did it. Injury.
He'd be very helpful right now. And I mean, also just like, it's just another case of which like the last couple of years, it's been the last 2 seasons, it's been Groundhog Day of like, you could have all of them, right? You could have Boyd and VC and Danton Heinen. You could have all 3 of them right now, and your team would be arguably in a better spot now than they are now. Like, I do not understand don't bring up poor Troy and his amazing cameos. He's doing some great cameo work out there. I love the guy.
I haven't watched any of them because they just depress me.
Well, don't worry, I'm gonna get you one for your birthday. Okay. It's just a matter of like, I don't like, on one hand they're playing 5D chess, but you know what it is? Jim Benning is playing 5D chess, but the person across from him is like, we're playing checkers. What are you doing? That's what this is. The person across 5D chess moves. This is checkers. What are you doing?
The person across from him is holding a deck of cards, and he's like, where did you get those pieces?
Yeah. Or it's like, have you seen the Pixar short? The Pixar short where that old man is playing chess against
himself, and he's like,
yeah, and he's like, aha, like that's what Jim Benning is doing right now, and then he just flips the board around.
It's very accurate because, like, how often has it been like joked about that the Canucks were the only team in on Tyler Myers after he was done with the Jets, and even though they're the only teams like pitching him money in term, they still added like extra years and like gave him $6 million, even though they were the only team interested in him. It's like,
I know people have been giving like the Holtby contract a lot of flack this year, because of just how it's been such a rough go for him.
Right.
But like, one of the things I've actually said before with Jim Benning, I don't think on the show, but just in like with like talking to people, is that like he almost never does a lot of like meh contracts, like where it's like, it's never like trying to swing. He's always trying to like swing for the fences instead of trying to go for like the single or a double, just like just getting it into the field, baseball style. And like, there are so many contracts that have been like, haven't worked for the Canucks over the years that I'm just always like the one I always look at is like Michael Del Zotto's. They only signed him for 2 years. He wasn't great, but he didn't need to be. He was only going to be there for 2 years in the middle of 2 rebuilding seasons. He was a stopgap. Big deal. I'm never going to be like, oh, Jim Benning completely screwed up on Michael Del Zotto, because it didn't really matter. He was just kind of there to buy some time, and that's perfectly okay. That's a great work, and that's kind of what I argue the Braden Holtby contract is, more or less. It's 2 years. It's really not gonna kill you in that particular stance. Especially because, and I will, just to get a little bit into the Braden Holtby game, even though we've kind of gone past it, just a little bit of,
right.
I actually think he was all right in that game against Montreal. I think he played pretty decently. The overtime, he was good. He was very good in the overtime. He had that one just dazzling glove save. That really looked like, a classic Braden Holtby kind of game, save there. And he just didn't, and that was a serious game where he just legitimately didn't get the help from his teammates. He got screened so many times. And admittedly, I have, like, this year, because, I'm at home, I'm not watching the games with anybody or anything, and I'm working, covering, clipping video and taking notes and stuff. I'm not like, I'm watching, but I'm not like, oh, let's go. Like, just screaming at the, yelling stuff at the TV. When I saw the Holtby replays on all of those screened goals, I was just screaming at my TV, what are you doing?
Pretty hard
Why
those
are
things.
You all trying to play goal in front of him? This is I was so mad because I was like, this
I
poor
kept
goalie.
DMing you during the game. I was like, all right, what's the verdict? And you were like, why are they screaming
I'm
him?
Turning red in the face. Like, this is why are there 3? Like, now there's 3 of them. What are you doing? It was so painful to watch this poor Braden Holtby and get
his
just
first game in 13 games and
getting over. Yeah, by his own defense. He did fine for what it was worth. I think Drance mentioned he had on the Armies that night that he had one goal below expectation or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if that factors in what kind of what the shot actual what they had to fight through. Does that factor in for screens and everything else? I imagine it doesn't.
Probably.
It's just a straight. Was it a shot? Yes. Did it go in? Yes. Sort of thing. As far as those stats go, because I would say that in that particular case, it's unfair. It's just a little bit unfair because he just was not getting the actual help he needed in that game, where he needed to see his lanes.
Not at all.
The only thing I could imagine, the only thing I could maybe fault him on in that game was maybe he needs to be louder he needs to be more vocal with his teammates on, hey, screen, push him out of the way. Because I mean, when I'm playing in games, I'm always just, there's a guy standing in front of my net, if it's my own guy, I'm like, move. I'm looking around, I'm looking through legs, feet, legs, bodies, whatever I can. But at the same time, I'm yelling at my defense, hey, move him out, move the guy out, and move him to the farthest, quickest route away from my line of vision, so I can get the puck. Because again, long range shots should be bread and butter for a lot for goalies. We love it when you shoot from that far out. It's wet, but if you're screening us and you're making it actively harder, and everyone's trying to play goal and block shots, and you are all missing, that's not good. You're completely just making my life way more difficult, and Holtby's life so much harder than it has to be. He was better, and I think he deserved a win in that game, albeit the rest of the team did not, even though they had a couple comebacks in that game and everything. He deserved a better fate. And I think the Ian Clark stuff, the work he's been putting in with Ian Clark has started kicking in a little bit. He looked a little bit more calm in net. He looked a little bit more compact and playing the style that he a little bit closer to what Demko's been capable of in terms of tracking the puck and everything. He still had a couple iffy moments, but I think he looked better overall.
There wasn't so many where you're like, oh god, this is just gonna be another blowout because Holtby can't stop a puck. This is more he was playing more rigidly and more kind of how Ian Clark wants his goalies to play. And it still didn't matter because he had Myers and Edler standing in front of him the entire game, making sure he couldn't use what he's been practicing and what he's been learning at 31 years old, because it was just, there's no chance given to him.
Yeah. And I mean, credit to Ian Clark as well. I mean, he's been helping Adam Gaudette with his shootout moves. Oh my God, extend this man.
What can't this coach do?
Straight up, what can't this coach do? That, and that's actually the thing. Okay, if any kids are listening who play hockey, I'm going to give you a very friendly word of advice. If you want to get better at shooting the puck and knowing where to shoot the puck, talk to your goalies. We can look at another goaltender and tell you what they don't like and what they might not want to walk away from. One of my teammates, when I played as a kid, would always ask me whenever in the games where I was backing up, he would always come to me 5 minutes into the first period and be like, hey, what's this goalie looking like? And would ask me and would specifically look for my advice on where to shoot. If you want to be a better shooter and learn how to beat goaltenders, ask your goaltenders, ask your own goalie, because they'll tell you what works and what doesn't.
I thought one of the more interesting things from I think Chris Faber and the Canucks Conversation podcast is they had Aidan McDonough on, and he was they were like, what did you do differently to prepare for this season? He's like, well, actually, I joined a couple goalie camps to practice my shot on goalies, and that's all you were doing basically was working on your shot. And so yeah, listen to Lachlan. He knows what he's talking about. He's obviously a goalie guy.
I am never going to play in the NHL. Yeah.
There's a reason why it's called the CreaseCast, if you didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. It should be the Cody cast now, because this guy's got a huge fan club after his weekend of trolling the Thanos of the hockey podcast community. But he's because this should be the Cody cast because he got to shout out all the Sievert stands out there in the world now. He's up to. She's out. You're almost too big for this podcast now. I might have to rebrand because I'm clearly second fiddle now. I mean, if it wasn't clear before, it is now.
I could not believe the follower increase that I had in like a 24-hour period.
Like we were fighting to get you to 1,000.
Yeah,
Like
this
it,
is
like
like
the
3 episodes ago where we were
Yeah.
talking about like, we're so close to getting me to 1,000. We're almost there. And
Yep.
then like not even like a week later,
You're
I'm
almost
like,
at 2,000.
we're basically like, okay, we're only 90 away from 2,000. Like that jump is like insane. But I know for a fact when the comments start playing again and like my content returns to being like niche stats about, Josh Tevez or whatever, that number is just going to like plummet down because they're going to be like, oh, this guy actually like talks about like stuff that I don't care about.
No, you know what, people, you know what, that I will argue that I think you'll keep I think you'll keep the majority of it, because you know what, people like people who work hard, like just who put in the hustle and the work. Like people will find your work interesting. Like they came for that stuff, they came for the trolling, but they'll stay for the quality of content and the effort that you put into talking about the comments.
Come for the trolling, stay for the real shit.
Yeah, and we can't, obviously we're not going to do a Comets Corner today, because I think their game got postponed. It got postponed again on Wednesday for the Wednesday game tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
And I don't even know when they're scheduled to play next. I know it's not this Friday.
Well, like I think I was saying it on the last time we actually kind of touched base on the Comets, was that the issue is most of their opponents this season are either Syracuse or Rochester. And it seems like the originator of a COVID breakout was Rochester. So because Rochester is like in their schedule, like every second game, you can't just be like, oh, we'll reschedule this one and then this one and this one. It's like everything's kind of tied in together. So you can't just all of a sudden be like, oh, we'll play with Syracuse. But it's like, no, Syracuse is out. And that's your only other available opponent. So their season, for all I know, like it could be, maybe they'll play this Saturday. It might be another full week off, basically, which then gets into the, oh God, like what a waste of a year for half of these kids in the AHL.
Yeah, we talked, well, you definitely really were at the beginning of the season. We're really concerned as far as the NHL goes, that they were not even going to finish the year. I mean, they're clearly going to now. There's no way they won't, as far as the NHL is concerned. But with the AHL and what you're seeing right now, do you think they finished the year? Because I mean, it's not looking so good if you're already at week 2 of no games.
So this is my fear right now, because like, yeah, the AHL was basically never a season culminating in Calder playoffs. It was just like, let's get some kids some games, right? The NHL's North Division had remained relatively unscathed this entire time. Like they hadn't had any COVID outbreak issues. There was no quarantine problems. And then Montreal had 2 players test positive, and now a full week's worth of games have been delayed for Montreal, Ottawa, and I think Edmonton or something.
Yeah.
But what that scares me in is that what happens if they do it again and it's 2 weeks of games missing? Are both leagues going to say, okay, we've gotten most of the year done, it's unfair, but we can't safely resume the season based on this third wave that the entire like continent of North America is going through right now? So I'm worried they might just shut the season down and say the top 2 seeds are going to get buys into the playoffs, and then seeds 3 through 6 in every division will do a play-in series again. And then they're going to have to do another bubble.
Because, I mean, they were going to have to do the bubble already, weren't they? Because of once you got to the conference finals.
But if you're doing play-in series and stuff like that to avoid travel, I'm wondering if they're going to have to do another bubble to safely get it going, because you can't postpone games the way that they can before, right? So I'm thinking they would have to bubble, but then I would think, okay, if the NHL decides this, the AHL then has no reason to continue, because if the regular season dies for the NHL, then the AHL players pretty much don't have a reason to play either because they're not playing for playoffs. They were just basically playing in the chance that their NHL teams called guys up to the taxi squad.
Right. I mean, I will ask I know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. This idea, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm surprised the AHL specifically didn't go for more like a bubble tournament style thing, because they're already only the Comets are only playing 3 teams, right? Like, why didn't they just send 3 or 4 teams to one hotel arena area? Be like, okay, you guys are going to play each other. There will be a playoff in between you guys and a final in between you guys for a division title sort of thing, and call that the year. So there's still something on the line for those players to play for and give them sort of a playoff aspect to it. And I know the answer is because they wanted to make the teams travel in case fans were able to come back in the States.
Right.
But I'm kind of just surprised that they didn't go that route, because that frankly seems like that would have been a lot safer and a lot would have kept players a lot healthier.
Yeah.
Down the stretch here, especially as now we're looking at they're affected. I mean, Montreal's affected. The Canucks have to be wary because they just played the Habs.
Literally just
twice.
played them and then played Winnipeg. So.
And apparently no one's tested positive for the Canucks, which is good, thank God.
But you could conceivably be carrying it too and not notice.
Right.
It's super dicey times, and I get why they're delaying the season, but a part of me just had the pessimist in me is man, at what point do they realize this is more widespread than they can handle? And with only 20 games remaining, what if they just say, okay, instead of 20 games left, we're going to take a 3-week break or 2-week break, and then we're going to resume only with 10 games left in the season or something. It's possible.
It's possible. I think they're really banking on teams getting the vaccines before then.
Right.
Which again is possible, especially more in America.
Especially in the States, yeah. Not so much Canada, but Canada's, States for sure.
I don't know why Canada's taken such a slow rollout. Maybe just less people. I don't know.
Less doses to go around, and prioritizing frontline workers and the elderly. So therefore, everyone else takes a back seat, and because they're vaccinating at such a low rate, it kind of leaves a lot to be desired. But
hell, I'm a frontline worker, or I'm a essential worker. Technically an essential worker.
According to the rule guides, if you're in manufacturing or in warehousing, you're an essential worker. So it's
and I can't even schedule a vaccine yet. I'm not allowed.
The lines are too insane or whatever.
Yeah, I think I have to be over 70 or something. So I can't.
Hey, well, if we keep watching the Canucks, we'll feel over 70. Maybe that'll apply. On your application, you could say, I'm not over 70, but I'm a Canucks fan. And they say, oh, right away, sir.
Oh my God, you're near death right away.
Yeah. You poor soul. Please.
Your anxiety is off the charts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, I mean, that anxiety goes back for a lot of reasons. It goes back for the fact that team's no good. It's the fact that they lose in the satisfactions, particularly in things like the draft lottery, which is
changing again.
Changing again in 2022. Do you know the rules, or do you want me to read them? Because I have them right here. This just
I know some of them,
and
today. All I can say is just how dumb. I don't like it at all. I was, after so many years of Edmonton just winning by default, being the worst team in the league, they had settled into this new rule set, which everyone agreed kind of punished the worst teams by giving teams that were middle of the pack a better chance at sliding into first and the second into third than the teams who genuinely needed talent on their roster. And after just a few years of that, they are now changing the rule again to weight it so that if you're a bottom 3 team, you can't pick worse than third overall, and only the bottom 10 teams in the league have a chance at jumping up to first, but you can't pick first overall more than twice in 5 years, which I don't know how they come across this. Cause I'm at what point have they ever looked at the standings and realized the bottom 4 teams in the NHL from the past 6 years or 7 years have been the same teams and it's been Detroit, Ottawa, the Canucks, and who's the other
Kings
one?
a couple times.
The Kings,
the
or like
Oilers.
Anaheim or something. Like, it's consistently been the same team stuck in the basement because of shitty draft odds from the last format. And so now you're punishing those teams for not being the beneficiaries of a system that was designed inherently to screw them over. And now they're being punished further by a system that will not reward them further should they actually finally have the luck on their side, by a system that should have been rewarding them or trying to help them overcome their difficulties the past 5 years. So the Canucks, in theory, say they bottom out completely, and like they're pretty well bottomed out as much as they can be. If they luck into a first round pick in the worst draft year by most accounts, a year where most scouts couldn't get a full season's worth of game time on different prospects, that sucks, because then that means if they keep bottoming out, they don't even have a chance in the next following years, in which they agree the draft following is going to be one of the deepest they've ever seen. So it's like, it's a broken system. It's always been a broken system. They're so adamant of curbing the idea of tanking that they're completely ignoring the fact that the systems that they keep changing never actually do anything to help bad teams overcome their situations. All it does is reward middle of the pack teams with like bogus lottery odds, like Philadelphia sliding up to first, or sorry, up into the top 3, or Winnipeg sliding up from 17th to 3rd in 2016. To get Patrick
Laine,
like
second, they got second that year.
It's fine. It's fun, when the lotteries happen, but like for fan bases, like it really sucks when, like, if you were a Detroit fan, it's pretty brutal that after years of never lucking out, constantly dropping, that in the year when you are at your worst, they're basically like, okay, if you win this year, the next 5 years, you have no shot inside the top 3. Like that's pretty dumb, considering every draft like system since McDavid has been designed to prevent teams like the Oilers from benefiting from multiple first overalls. They must have forgot about, the Pittsburgh Penguins getting 3 top 3 picks in like 3 years or 4 years or whatever it was. It's just like, it's hard to not be like, the system's broken in general, but you're not helping in any way, nor are you acknowledging how the previous systems weren't helping either, and you're not doing anything to make them better.
It's such a, like, I don't envy the league having to deal with this, because it's such a like fine line you have to find, because there's no really fair way to do it, right? Because you can't just go, okay, dead last gets first, because then you absolutely
you're encouraging tanking.
You're absolutely encouraging teams to not just tank, but to suck,
deliberately suck, like fielding an AHL team, which was basically what Toronto did to try and to best get their chances up for the Austin Matthews draft. Like there's no way about it. That's what they did.
But even with them, like, there was an air of, we're still like, they were definitely not good, but they didn't make a conscious effort to like,
it was a conscious
try
effort.
And well,
that was like, absolutely tanking.
Like, no, they never. You know what they never did though? They never. If there was a guy who went on like a sudden hot streak, they were never like, "Oh, you're going to the AHL now," or they suddenly traded him. Whereas with Buffalo, the year they went for McDavid, they absolutely did that. And
it
absolutely, and it did not work for them in a way. Almost, I'm like, you kind of deserve it. You kind of deserve that. But I mean, they still got Jack Eichel out of it, so you can't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you still got like a top 10 center in the NHL. Unfortunately, you trusted Jason Botterill and a bunch of other duds to build around him, and they fucked that up every single year since drafting him. So
and
you get what you pay for.
Right. And the last setup I actually kind of liked. The problem with it was that, it like a team in 16th could still win first overall if they completely just, like the last playoff team could luck out and grab a guy. Like I believe the time that it was really close was, I think the Flyers were the last team eliminated in the from playoff contention, and then landed Nolan Patrick in the second overall pick because they just lucked out.
They
in
jumped
the
from like
lottery.
17th to second or whatever.
So I get that. My actual thought process was it's so impossible to find one that is like universally like everyone's like, yep, this is fair. We understand this. There's no really perfect way to do it. I do get annoyed at the whole literally anytime it goes a little bit differently than they expect, somebody complains and gets all like upset. It's like, these are the rules. Like, why? Like, you knew what the rules were. You knew this was a possibility. Quit whining. And we can't do this every time somebody unexpected wins. If that being said, if I had control of the draft, like, I don't know if you've had your thoughts on how you would have done it. I would have, as an idea, like my thought process was okay, 16, by the time Seattle arrives, 16 teams are going to miss the playoffs every year. So the bottom 8, if you're in the bottom 8, you only you guys get a shot at first. If you're in the bottom 12, only you get a shot at second. Bottom 16, everyone gets a shot at third. That was kind of the way I was like, okay, this kind of makes it fair, so a team could still theoretically get only up to third from the bottom, from the top. But it does guarantee that someone in the bottom 8 of the league would get a first overall pick, which would curb tanking enough that someone who's still bad and bad but deserves that pick would more likely to get it. That was kind of my thought. I don't know if you've had anything different. I'm not saying the league should hire me for this.
I'm just a fan of like letting things play out, because you can't, like, the arguments now moving forward are going to be like, McDavid, or like the Oilers are only in playoffs because they were the last team under the old draft system that rewarded them for failure. And then people are going to say, oh, the only reason the New Jersey Devils came out of their rebuild is because they managed to get Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes in 2 of 3 years, right? Yep. And then all the arguments are going to be like, oh, well, how come Detroit never got their shit together? Or how come, the Canucks never went ahead, or Buffalo or whatever? And it's like, well, because the system that came after they were literally in their worst of worst years didn't reward them for it. It punished them.
It's so funny that it literally just surrounds that horrible era of Canucks hockey of, we made the draft impossible for the Canucks, who were bad to win, likely to win. Yeah. And as soon as they start getting, like, I mean, they're not looking good right now, but as far as the future is concerned, they're kind of set as far as their core is concerned. Now it's like, okay, we're going to make it easy for the teams at the bottom to win again. And you're just like, are you kidding me? I sat through Jason Megna and Michael Chaput on the first line for this.
The Desjardins years, that's all that's all it boils down to, is just like, if you're gonna have a draft system, just stick with it. Like if they stuck with the current system that, you had teams jumping up 17 spots, I would be fine with it, because at least you stuck with it for at least 10 years. Give me 10 years of the same system, so you can at least judge the league as a whole as a 10-year period of the same equality. But when you have 3 different systems in the span of 15 years to try and rate how a team has, adapted their rebuild, built their teams, restocked, whatever, you can't now, because the asterisk now is, Detroit was the 31st to 32nd ranked team 5 years in a row. But they won once, and they picked, Brant Clark from this year's draft. And then, Arizona got the first overall the second year because Detroit had already won it, and they got Luke Hughes or whatever, you know what I mean? So it was all just like timing that worked out for them, when it shouldn't be about that. It should just be like, okay, if you're a shit team, if you're in that position where you should probably be winning a first overall pick, then who cares if you won one recently? It shouldn't come down to that. It should be just like, just let the system play itself out.
Hell, the Rangers were like near the top of the like teams that missed the last 2 years in a row. They got Capo Caco at number 2 in the Vancouver draft that I was at, and Alexis Lafreniere last year, who actually has been relatively quiet this year. Both of them have been relatively quiet in New York, which is kind of a bummer. Right. But like they still like totally lucked out considering their placement in the standings, that they absolutely should not have been in the main contention for either of those players, and they got them anyway. And it's just a mess in that regard. And just
that's all you can really say about the draft system is it's a mess. There will never be a perfect solution or a perfect answer, but I am on team just stick with something for a long enough period that you can evaluate the league properly based off of it. That's my place on the matter.
Yeah. And with that, I will ask you a question in terms of evaluating talent. Where would you evaluate the Calgary Flames at this point in the season? At this point in the season, they technically have won 5 of their last 10.
Yes.
But with Daryl Sutter coming in. But I don't know if anyone saw the highlight from the last game where they lost to Ottawa. But they are in a little. I would argue they're in a bit of trouble. And
they're in a bit of a funk.
Yes. So there was a clip that went up last night. I believe it was Brady Trenatero, something like that. Basically, he clipped. Basically, the Senators won their game last night with Philip Gustafsson, their 4th string goaltender. He won his first NHL game, and one of the Senators, I believe it was Brady Tkachuk, went to try and go collect the puck from the Flames' end for him.
Right.
Rasmus Andersson on the Flames had picked up the puck and tried to leave with it. And when Brady Tkachuk went after it, Andersson chucked it away from him. And then Matthew Tkachuk flipped it away into the corner just to be asses.
I almost want to say Matt Tkachuk recognized it was a shitty thing to do, but he had to have the backs of his team because earlier in the year, he got pissed off that his team didn't have his back when he got in a fight with the entire Maple Leafs lineup. And also, so part of me is like, it's his brother. So he's like, I have to have my team's back, but I need to recognize this is shitty. So how do I mend that bridge? So he shot it into the corner or whatever for him to go get. So it's like, I'm still giving them the puck back because I know it's shitty, but I'm doing it in like a dickhead way to have my teams back. But
now,
what an asshole thing to do.
Awful.
From now, Anderson or whatever.
Now, to be fair, the Senators did the exact same thing last year to a different team. I don't know who it was. Brady Tkachuk did the same thing to somebody else last year. Yes. Okay. I believe it was... I want to say it was Caden Primo's first NHL win as the goalie for the Habs, and Carey Price literally booked it towards the Senators' tunnel where they were trying to leave because Tkachuk had taken the puck, and like Price literally went to go get the puck for his fellow goalie, trying to like, hey, give me that damn thing. So they've done that before, but here is where the difference lies. The Senators are a bad team going nowhere, and especially were last year. To see the Flames do this, it's a totally rude, like sore loser thing to do, which really makes me think that their season's done. As far as I'm concerned, that body language,
that was about as like our season's toast, like shit to do or shit to pull off.
Imagine having the Ottawa Senators, who are one of the like lowest ranked teams in the NHL, living so rent free in your head that you felt the need to be a huge ass about giving their fourth string goalie who you lost to a puck. That is fragile. That's a fragile hockey team as far as I'm concerned with Calgary. And honestly, I think that spoke volumes, in terms of, I don't think that team's making the playoffs. I don't think they have it. I think they're way too mentally not there right now. I think they're very clearly just not in the mindset of a winner right now. And they won't get there in time to make a postseason push. I think they're screwed.
Well,
Do you agree?
That's kind of the vibes I get. It's like the coaching change, like that's the second coach for the Gaudreau like core group in like a year. No, but like in the past year, because they had Treliving come in, or not Treliving, Gulletson or whoever it was, right?
You can't even remember.
I couldn't even tell
Jeff
you.
Ward. So it was
Jeff Darryl Ward Sutter,
then Jeff Ward, because Bill Peters got fired for the misconduct, for the racist stuff. Right. Before that, it had been Gulletson, and before that, it had been Bob Hartley, and before that, it had been someone else. Because literally, this core has gone through everything. Like they're done. It's like right?
4 or 5 coaches in 6 years. How many years now have people been talking about how Gaudreau wants out? He doesn't want to play in Calgary anymore. Like, obviously, they're a team where they face, it's like the Edmonton conundrum for so long, where people were like, oh God, if McDavid's on a team that is so used to losing that they don't care when they start streaking bad. This is what the Flames have basically been like since that playoff run in 2015 against the Canucks, where they face adversity, they wilt. Their last year when they won the division and then they got bounced in the first round, you could tell something is off. And it always seemed like, okay, it has to be goaltending. It's just got to be a goaltending issue they fix. They get Markstrom in. He plays really solid for them on a heater, and then he goes down with injury, and the team collapses. They get rid of the coach. They're like, this is over. Everything sucks. It's too cold.
And this is, I mean, that would be if that was their complaint, that's fair. That's totally fair. Calgary is very cold. Yeah. But they've also, like, what's interesting is this is a team that, particularly the Gaudreau, Monahan, the older core, like Tkachuk, I don't think is included in this case, like that younger group. Right. I think they've been accused before of being kind of coach killers, in the sense of when they decide they don't like a coach, they just stop playing for them. And that's why they've gone through so many coaches, and basically they've been more or less allowed to kind of rule the roost a little bit, which is not how you should let a team go. You absolutely need to be like, hey, if you're not going to play for the coach, you're the one who's going, not them. And I think Treliving might be on his last stand here. I mean,
seems like
I think for all 5 of those coaches, nobody gets that kind of leverage.
The Markstrom, Tanev, Levo acquisitions were definitely like this is my push. This is my all-in maneuver. I need to get this core into playoffs and getting a round 1, because I'm probably not coming back next year. And if they can't do it with a goaltender who was like arguably should have been a Vezina or Hart candidate last year, if they can't do it with this guy backing them, he's obviously a great locker room presence. Like, a part of why he went to Calgary was because he's buddies with Rasmus Anderson, I believe. So if that still isn't enough, they're going to be changing shit up wholesale in this offseason. They have to. They absolutely have to.
Outside of Markstrom and Tkachuk, and I think maybe, and Anderson, I think would be on that list as well, and like Lindblom, I think,
or Lindholm.
Lindholm. That's what I'm thinking of, Elias Lindholm. Like, I don't think anyone else out there is an untouchable. I think you let them all go. You just kind of fire sale there. I mean, they're in a lot. They just don't look like a team that's going to be capable of winning enough games to make it into the postseason. I mean, like, we talk about the Canucks struggles. At least they look like they're invested. Like, they look like they're
right. Like, JT Miller is pissed off 90% of the time because he has a high expectation of success. Like when he's on a line with Adam Gaudette and he fires a pass and it goes into his skates, he has zero problem swearing and raging at Gaudette for not controlling or accepting said pass. The dude, like, you can say what you want about like how professional that is, or like how maybe he shouldn't be doing that to his teammate, but he cares. Yeah. There's a give a fuck meter on the Canucks team. Like, Niels Höglander, even like the past like couple weeks, he hasn't really looked that like powerful or dynamic as he was in say like the first 15 games of the year, but he's still giving a fuck and trying his heart out. Zach McEwen isn't that great of a player. He isn't going to push the needle that far, but every shift he looks like he gives a fuck and is trying. You can say the same about Antoine Roussel. He's having awful games, but he gives a fuck. Like you have Calgary where like Milan Lucic is having sort of a resurgence year and playing like really well with like Dylan Dubé. He's giving a fuck, and he's like the only one with that line of his alongside Markstrom and like
Tanev
and Noah Hannafin. Like
Tanev has been very good this year.
Yeah, he's like the wins above replacement ratings that Dom Lucian or Jay Fresh were putting out, and it's like he's third in the NHL. Yeah. Like they went all in, and the pieces they got to take this team over the edge are providing. Maybe not Josh Levo, but that's expected when you build your depth.
That's
right. It doesn't matter, but when the pieces you pick up in free agency for once actually contribute and are meaningful pieces to your core, and your core forwards don't give a shit and they don't try, and they're salty and stealing pucks off of some 22-year-old kid making his debut in a game and actually winning. Like, don't be asshole. Like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, get over yourself. Like, it's fucking hockey.
The Canucks have done a good job this year of like there's a willingness to punch above their weight class, even though they can't. The Senators that we put in the same boat, where they're a bad hockey team by obvious like lineup standards, but they're still try as if they're a playoff team. They still give the effort that a playoff team would. They just don't have the talent to do it. Yeah. Calgary is a team that absolutely has the talent to do it. They just don't seem to care enough to get there. Yeah. And then you look at a team like I don't know, if you want to look outside of the division, you look at say like the Islanders right now, where they've always been kind of a team that we're always counting out, and like there's no way they're gonna do as well as they did the season before, and they always come back.
They always overcome
better.
They always have a team that buys into their systems, like their core understands what they need to do to win with their coach Barry Trotz. Like they lose Anders Lee because of an ACL. Tearing his ACL for the entire season, rest of the season.
Loss.
And maybe if that was the Flames, they'd completely pack their shit, not try. The Islanders have like you heard it in JT Miller's post-game presser as well. He was like, moving forward, if Horvat can't come back, it's a next man up mentality, and we have to create an environment where the next man in the division believe in the same system and try their hardest, and we support them to play their best hockey. That's the Islanders' philosophy. Like they lose Anders Lee, it doesn't matter. They've got Oliver Wahlstrom playing out of his mind. They've got, Josh Bailey, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Okay, I think so who just came back and had a really nice talk, like a really nice interview the other day? I think it was Thomas Hickey. He came back on defense.
Yeah, his first game in like a year or something like that.
And and I think he scored, I think, even in that game, and he was just emotional. I think his brother had cancer and everything. It was a very sweet moment. Yeah. And like the Island, like this is the first time I've ever looked like the Islanders just lost their captain, and I'm like, that's the first time I've ever been like, you know what, I'm not even worried. They're gonna still make the playoffs, which is shocking if you remember the Islanders a few years back. Yeah. Like they were atrocious for a long time. Now there's not even this point of like, I'm like, oh, they'll be fine. Like they'll find somebody who can fill the role a little bit, but they're not gonna miss. They're gonna be totally fine.
There's losing a player and seeing and basically losing as a team because of the on ice impact lost. Like Bo Horvat gets lost, and as well as Elias Pettersson, the on ice product is going to suffer for it. But then there's losing a player like the Flames losing Markstrom, and they just pack it in, even though they've got Big Save Dave back there, like who's like a completely fine backup option for them, but they still wilt. They don't have any resilience. There's no next man up mentality. It's just like, this sucks. Our core can't do it. Pack it in, boys. Yeah. That's the vibes they put off. And which is great news for the Canucks.
Yeah. And I'll say, like you talk about next man up, and I've been I've been banging this drum for weeks now. A lot of other local media and personalities have gotten on this bandwagon with me here, where I say, like, look, this division is nuts enough that if you move guys, the Canucks moved guys at the deadline, like supposed to be like major depth pieces like Brandon Sutter or a Jay Beagle or a Tanner Pearson. There's enough of a give a shit attitude in that locker room that the next man up, even if they're an AHL guy, could come in and they could still maybe make the playoffs. It's not completely out of the question that they do it. If the other teams stumble around them, like, go. What have you have to lose at this point?
That's the CreaseCast mentality. Is what do you have to lose? Get weird with it. This could be the year where you give up Jordy Ben, Tanner Pearson, and still have a better winning record than the Jets at the end of this year. It's weird enough. You might as well.
Why not?
Yeah. So speaking of getting weird with it, just before we sign out for the night, don't forget, folks, to vote on Trust the Process's Floorboards of Glory bracket.
Yes.
Just like the sheer amount of work that Wyatt and Jay Bowman are putting into this like irreverent like bracket of just like subtle iconic moments of Canucks history is just tip of the cap to the boys, because
you know what, Infinity Gauntlet
so
to the Trust the Process guys. We got to get them on at some point.
I take back my picks for the goalie. Give it to the Trust the Process guys, because what they're doing, like with the videos, the getting Cindy on board for the graphics, big shout outs to them. Like the content is great, and as tough as the Canucks have played recently, it's nice to have some kind of fun content happening in the background. So yeah, we just wanted to give a little shout out to them, because like, man, those guys are so funny, and like just coming up with this like randomly in the middle of the season is just absolutely wonderful. So shout out to them.
Yeah, and depending on when you listen to this right now, I believe the vote is between they're doing the poll right now between Elias Pettersson's debut game and Lee Sweat's game winner against the Predators in 2011. I will say that this season has been just like a gauntlet run for us, and like I'm exhausted. It's been stressful at times, but when I watched the first video of the Floorboards of Glory about Jeff Cowan and the bra, and it literally the lady who threw a bra on the ice after he scored 2 goals. I remember that game as a kid, and literally all those memories of just flooded back of why I love this team and why I love hockey in general. Of just these are the moments I live for. This is why I'm here. This is why we go through these awful runs of bad hockey. It's for this, like for the Jeff Cowan. It's for the Lee Sweats. It's for the who's gonna come up next? Like some just guys or stories you've completely forgotten about are gonna show back up again, and you're gonna be so excited. And you're just going to have that moment where you're just like, oh my God, this is, like all of those memories of like childhood or,
some good old
your
nostalgia.
Young adult years are going to come back, and it's going to be great. So shout out to Wyatt and Jay putting this together. It's
for giving us nostalgia for the good moments. Hopefully we get some more of those in the remainder of this Canucks season. Yeah. But until then, folks, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We got to shit on the Calgary Flames. We got to talk about kind of the positives of the Canucks. We always enjoy those kinds of games where you get to shit on other teams for a change. As always, don't forget to rate, like, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. The reviews help us in the algorithms. Don't forget to follow us on our YouTube channel as well, where we post the entire podcast in its video format, where you can see my nice Positive Vibes Only shirt and my very peculiar looking goatee. I don't know what this is. It, like in real life, it isn't that prominent, but for whatever reason, Zoom really,
I believe that's called
makes
a soul
this prominent.
patch.
Yeah, but like I don't have a soul patch, but Zoom wants me to have one, so it pumps it up a bit, which is a bit bizarre. But if you're not a YouTube guy, you can also check us out on our Patreon account, where we post, speaking of irreverent, weird content, where we talk about random crap. we got some ideas for our next video for the next off the post episode. So look forward to that. We're going to be recording that. I don't know, probably.
I mean, there's no
Wednesday
games
since there's no Comets game. Might as well. But yeah, until then, Lachlan, where can the fine folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lach and the Crease, and you can find my work over at lachandthecrease.com, where I do the North Division Power Rankings every single week. Last week was Marvel Week, in honor of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Next week may have a theme again. I don't know. I'm hoping to do maybe one where it's like completely just reader submissions. That would be kind of a fun one to do. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out for that. And I also do like Canucks jersey records, where you can find out which jerseys are the most lucky and the most cursed. Right now, they're all just kind of a muddled mess.
Mostly cursed.
Mostly cursed with a dash of just luck for the home jersey. Just little bit. Cody, where can they find you?
The fine folks listening to the CreaseCast can find me at Cody Sievertson on Twitter. I'm also on cometsharvest.com and Comets Harvest on Instagram, where you can see game day recaps and various stats about the Canucks AHL prospects. Obviously, not a lot of updates recently because of the cancellations and postponements, but hey, hopefully we'll get some content soon enough. But until then, folks, you can catch us at our next episode, which will be coming out either on Patreon or on Saturday after the Wednesday game against Winnipeg, barring any, hopefully no cancellations. But till then, folks, this has been the CreaseCast. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, guys.
Bye.